Jana Jai Tiravanachari Jaya Kunjabihari Jaya Kunjabihari Jaya Yamunatiravanachari Jaya Kunjabihari Jaya Kunjabihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunjabihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunjabihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Shri Radha Madhava Ki Jai, Shri Radha Madhava Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Vivajakacharya Stotara Sata Shri Srimad Divine Grace. Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Vivajakacharya Stotara Sata Shri Srimad Divine Grace. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Devamrita Swavanita Namane Prachara Purva Lakshamcha Bhakta Charma Vinata Bharata Ravikarani Vyasasana Vichtinama Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitinamane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pacharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschate Deshatani. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th canto, chapter 1, text number 50. Panchabhi kurute svartan panchavedata panchabhi ekastu shodesh Sodashena trin svayam saptadasho shnute. Panchabi kurute svartan panchavedata panchabhi. Ekastu shodashena trin svayam saptadasho snute. Panchabi kurute svartan panchavedata panchabhi. Ekastu shodashena trin svayam saptadasho snute. Everybody can learn their Sanskrit numbers today. Word for word translation says Panchabihi, with the 5 working senses: voice, arms, legs, anus, and genitals. Those are the 5 working senses. Kurute, performs. This is an important word that comes up in so many shlokas, same as the root word krit, from karma, and from which we get our English create, just to do something. It's kurute. So we see this often. Svaartan, his desired interests. Pancha, the 5 objects of the senses: sound, form, touch, aroma, and taste. Veda, knows, ata, thus, panchabihi, by the 5 senses of perception, sometimes they're called the knowledge-acquiring senses: hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, and feeling. Eka, the one. Tu, but, shodashena, by these 15 items and the mind. Trin, by the 3 categories of experience: happiness, distress, and a mixture of both. Swayam, he, the living entity himself. Saptadashaha, the 17th item, ashnute, enjoys. So there we go. We learned some new numbers. Pancha, of course, is 5, like the Pancha Tattva. Eka, 1. Trin, 3, just like we get our 3. Shodashena is 15, and Saptadasha is 17. Anyway, translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Above the 5 senses of perception, the 5 working senses, and the 5 objects of the senses is the mind. Let's try that again. Above the 5 senses of perception, the 5 working senses, and the 5 objects of the senses is the mind, which is the 16th element. Above the mind is the 17th element, the soul, the living being himself, who, in cooperation with the other 16, enjoys the material world alone. The living being enjoys 3 kinds of situations, namely happy, distressful, and mixed. Purport. Everyone engages in work with his hands, legs, and other senses just to achieve a certain goal according to his concocted ideas. One tries to enjoy the 5 sense objects, namely form, sound, taste, aroma, and touch, not knowing the actual goal of life, which is to satisfy the Supreme Lord. Because of disobeying the Supreme Lord, one is put into material conditions, and he then tries to improve his situation in a concocted way, not desiring to follow the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nevertheless, the Supreme Lord is so kind that he comes himself to instruct the bewildered living entity how to act obediently, and then gradually return home back to Godhead, where he can attain an eternal, peaceful life of bliss and knowledge. The living entity has a body, which is a very complicated combination of the material elements. And with this body, he struggles alone, as indicated in this verse by the words ekastu. For example, if one is struggling in the ocean, he must swim through it alone. Although many other men and aquatics are swimming in the ocean, he must take care of himself, because no one else will help him. Therefore, this verse indicates that the 17th item, the soul, must work alone. Although he tries to create society, friendship, and love, no one will be able to help him but Krishna, the Supreme Lord. Therefore, his only concern should be how to satisfy Krishna. That is also what Krishna wants. Sarvadharman parityaja mam ekam sharanam vraja.
People bewildered by material conditions try to be united, but although they strive for unity among men and nations, all their attempts are futile. Everyone must struggle alone for existence with the many elements of nature. Therefore, one's only hope, as Krishna advises, is to surrender to him, for he can help one become free from the ocean of nescience. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore prayed, Ainanda tanuja kinkaram patitamam vishame bhavam buddho kripaya tava para pankaja stita dhuli sadrishim vichintaya. O Krishna, beloved son of Nanda Maharaj, I am your eternal servant, but somehow or other I have fallen into this ocean of nescience, and although I am struggling very hard, there is no way I can save myself. If you kindly pick me up and fix me as one of the particles of dust at your lotus feet, that will save me. In a similar way, Bhaktivinoda Thakur sang, Anadi karma pale padi bhavarnava jale taribari na deki upaya. My dear Lord, I cannot remember when I somehow or other fell into this ocean of nescience, and now I can find no way to rescue myself. We should remember that everyone is responsible for his own life. If an individual becomes a pure devotee of Krishna, he is then delivered from the ocean of nescience. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cham Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhana Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrindam. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So above the five senses of perception, the five working senses, and the five objects of the senses is the mind. The mind is superior to all these things. We have our senses for seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling. We have our five working senses, our arms, legs, anus, genitals, and voice. And then there's the five objects of the senses: sound, form, touch, aroma, and taste, which are also corresponding to the five principal gross elements: earth, water, fire, air, and space. So lots of fives to keep things simple. But the mind is superior to all these things. The mind is subtle material energy. It's part of Krishna's separated material energy, Bina Prakriti Ashtada, right? Mano, Buddhir, Ahankara, the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego. These are also Krishna's material energies. But there's a hierarchy of energy, and the mind is just better. It's incredible technology, really, and we take it for granted by using it to pursue sense gratification. And that's kind of the point of this verse, several of these verses being spoken by the Yamadutas, surprisingly. And they're pointing out that the mind that is uncontrolled and that is used to pursue sense gratification is the cause of one's condemnation and obliges them to suffer in this life and in the next life and maybe even in hellish life. So that the Yamadutas would be saying this should be a bit of a wake-up call for us. They're describing the process for going into a suffering condition. When instead of the mind being superior, the senses and the sense objects become the most important, then madness. Madness is what is explicitly stated by Lord Rishabhadev, which we're going to read in a few chapters about the interesting avatar of Rishabhadev and his great instructions to his sons. And therein he says, this is actually crazy. What is real craziness? We like to throw that word around a lot. Oh, that's so crazy. Did you hear about this thing that happened? Oh, it's crazy. Oh, I can't believe she said that. She's so crazy. According to the definition of Lord Rishabhadev, we are all pretty crazy. He says, somewhere in that 5th chapter of the 5th canto, Nunam pramata kurute vikarma yad indriya pritaya apranoti nasadu manye yata atmanoyam asana pikleshada asadeha. He says, for someone for whom the indriya, the senses, are priti, very dear, that's the most important thing. I must take care of my senses and my sense gratification. He says pramata is madness. It's the craziness. Nunam pramata kurute vikarma, just like we learned this word kurute today. That when one takes the senses as near and dear, treats them affectionately, cares for them, even at the expense of one's own well-being, and even by exploiting others, then kurute vikarma. It's inevitable that one will perform vikarma, very bad activities, sinful activities. We see this time and time again. Let us not think that having a body and senses is an innocent affair. If left unchecked, vikarma is the result. Destruction and death. Exploiting other bodies, even killing them for a sense gratification. This is vikarma, it's very bad. And the senses are inclined to do it. The senses are inclined towards the sense objects, just like the river is inclined towards the sea. It naturally flows in that direction, downhill, towards the lowest point. So similarly, the senses are inclined towards the sense objects. Only if the mind is in its proper position as superior element, then the senses can be controlled, because otherwise there must be sinful activity performed. Let's recognize the danger. Krishna illustrates it very clearly in the Bhagavad Gita. It's dangerous to have a body and senses. We're really playing with fire here. Krishna says, Dhyayato vishayam pungsa sangas teshu pajayate. For contemplating, meditating on the objects of the senses, if that's what we're thinking about, I'm going to get this thing for my body, this thing's going to go in my mouth, that thing's going to go in my ear, and I'll put this other object into my eyes, and then I'll find some new objects to put in there. We're always thinking about it, always making these plans, concocting plans. As Prabhupada says in this purport, so many concocted ideas. So, dhyayato vishayam punksha. We spend so much time concocting these ideas for sense gratification. Sangha sanjayate kama. There must be a very strong desire that's born out of that. Kama krodha bijayate. And then there's anger. It's not innocent to have senses. If we're thinking about, I gotta take care of my senses, they're so dear to me, then there must be reckless desire, and when that desire is unfulfilled, then there's anger, krodha. Krodha bhavati samahat smriti vibrama. Smriti brahmshad buddhinasho buddhinasha pranashati. Krishna says the disease continues to spiral out of control. From that anger comes bewilderment. Oh, it's your fault, and it's your fault that I'm not getting my sense gratification. It's the government's fault. It's my mother's fault. Right? You can go to psychotherapy and talk about all the people you can blame for not getting the sense gratification that you think you deserve. And this is bewilderment. If I had just gotten it like this or like that, if I just had this right combination of sense objects, then I'll finally be fulfilled in my heart. This is bewildering. I've tried all the different sense objects. I know I'll go to a different country and enjoy the sense objects there, and somehow it'll be different. Samoha, bewilderment. Krodad bhavati samahat smriti vibrama. And then one's intelligence, one's memory is lost. You can't even remember, what was I going for in the first place? What is it that I used to enjoy anyway? Can't remember, like, what actually brings me happiness? Some people, they do this intentionally, get to such a low point where they try to intentionally forget by drowning in alcohol. Smriti Brahmshad Buddhinasho, when memory is lost, then intelligence is destroyed. One doesn't even know what is right or wrong, what is up or down, who am I? Buddhinasha Pranashati. And then one's self is completely destroyed. That's when the Yamadutas show up and say, hey, you're obviously not fit for human life anymore because you've allowed the senses to be out of control like an animal. So we've got a better situation for you, a better body, more suited to your needs, a body where you're simply controlled by the senses because that's obviously what you're most interested in. That's what the Yamadutas facilitate. That's what they're trying to do with the Jamyal here. If you just want to have sense gratification, there are better bodies for that. The human body isn't actually that good for it. You can't eat without putting half the world in malnourishment and the other half of the world is obese. You can't have sex without, spreading all sorts of disease and all sorts of violence. Just like you can't even do the simple things that animals do quite easily without thinking about it. This human body isn't very good at sense gratification. We don't sleep very well, have to take pills, get white noise machines, earplugs. What can we do? So the Yamadutas, they facilitate, Yamaraj facilitates better bodies for people who just want dhyato visham pungsa, just contemplating the objects of the senses, taking the senses as near and dear, making that the most important thing, and even exploiting other bodies to meet those ends. There's a better form of life for that. It's called being a cat or a dog. So it is not an innocent affair to pursue sense gratification. We're really playing with fire there. And it's even worse to be contemplating sense gratification, to make that one's meditation, to make the objects of the senses very dear to one. Indriya Priti. Oh, I love you, my sense object. All I really need is you. Where's my phone? I don't even have it. Oh, my little rectangle. Right? If we lose it, I don't know, where is it? Where's my little rectangle? I need it. Indriya Priti. It's very dear. We contemplate this word Priti, like Priya. Oh, you're so important to me. If we drop it on the ground, oh no, are you okay? I have a special case for you to take care of you. This is making the senses and the objects very near and dear. But it's not an innocent thing. It's the pathway towards hell. And you're inviting a visitation from the Yamadutas. In this purport to the Bhagavatam verse, Srila Prabhupada twice mentions the word concoction. Because our senses are never really satisfied with the objects. Therefore, we're always concocting. This is where the mind gets out of control. Concocting new ideas for sense gratification. Krishna says, Prajahanam yada, prajahati yada kaman sarvan partamanogatan. That the Stita Dhir Muni, the real yogi who's sober, who's focused, who's progressive, has given up all of the concoctions of the mind, the varieties of desire that are concocted in the fertile factory of one's brain. Let's try to recognize this process going on, concocting new ideas, just like some Hollywood notion of a witch pouring different, weird ingredients into a cauldron to concoct some brew. We're concocting ideas. Oh, a little bit of this or a little bit of that. And if I can just get some of this sense gratification and just a little bit of that person, but not too much, of course, because I don't really like them that much. And always trying to come up with this combination of all the things that I need to finally get some happiness. Concocting and concocting again and again and again. Krishna says that the real Muni, the yogi, they've given up all of that. Sarvan Partam. Yeah, Sarvan Partam Manogatan. Manogatan. All of the concoctions within one's brain. The real Muni has given that up. As we should, because the concoctions are not very good. It's like the cheap Chinese knockoff of real sensual gratification. We go for the cheap thing, you know? Like you go to Walmart and then there's the dollar store. It's like even cheaper. Like even worse. And you think, what is this brand name? Where did this even come from? So whatever factory has produced these low quality products, you know, it's like you'd only do it out of desperation. Let me just buy the cheapest thing. And you know it's not a very quality product. It's not going to satisfy for long. But we're just so cheap. So similarly, let's recognize the quality of the products produced in the factory of our brain. Let's take stock. Let's do some inventory. Audit. It's time to audit our brain factory, Manogatan, and to see, are the concocted ideas good quality? Or are they just compelling me towards hellish material life? So Krishna says that the Stitadhira Muni, the great yogi who's actually sober and focused, gives up all of this concoction, rejects all of these varieties of concocted ideas, and recognizes it's not working out for me. It's not working out to just concoct new ideas, combine this thing with that thing and that thing with this thing, and just mix them all together in the hope that one of them is going to give me the pleasure that I want. At some point we have to recognize this is not working. And as Prabhupada said explicitly, shut down this factory of the brain, concocting all of these ideas, and just take Krishna's program for pleasure. Follow the instruction, the guidance, the advice of the pleasure experts. That's why we call him Krishna. That's why we're attracted to Krishna, not some other form of God. We're attracted to Krishna because he's the pleasure expert. But are we attracted enough to finally shut down our concoctions, our factory, brain factory, concocting new ideas? Can we recognize that Krishna is really the pleasure expert? Therefore, his advice on how to enjoy is the best. Simply chanting his holy names, raising your arms in the air, kicking your legs out to the front and to the back and to the side. That's the highest pleasure. That was Krishna's advice. Satatam kirtayanto mam. When Krishna says Satatam kirtayanto mam, always chant my holy names, is he saying that because he's petty? Because he needs more attention? Right? Some sort of attention drama queen? Is that why he's saying always chant my names? Is he saying it because he has some insecurity? I need more followers. Why does Krishna say Satatam kirtayantamam? So that we can enjoy. It's more pleasurable to be connected to Krishna. Krishna is the pleasure expert. That's what Rama means, the reservoir of pleasure. But when are we going to recognize my ideas aren't working? The concoctions in my brain are poor quality, and that Krishna's plan for enjoyment is actually superior. When are we going to recognize that? We're so habituated to certain habits of consumption and social pressures, and therefore we keep consuming these sense objects again and again and again and again. And society compels us to. Friends and family compel us to. Are you consuming? What are you consuming? Are you not consuming? What's wrong with you? Like my father was visiting here a little while ago. Like the basic dialogue is just, what are you consuming? Oh, this is a quality type of consumption. Oh, you have this? object. This is good for consuming. I've been consuming this. They've been consuming that. There's like this pressure. Or you're getting some, right? I'm getting some. It's like we need some validation from everybody else that it's right to continue to consume. So these habits of consumption, these social pressures, they're very, very hard to fight against. It's very hard to emancipate the senses from their objects. And that's why these verses, like this 50th verse of the first canto, of the first chapter of the 6th canto, that's why these verses are very helpful, because what's implied here, what's being described, is an analysis called Sankhya. If we take the time to dissect the whole entanglement with the material objects and really think about it, I got the senses of perception, the working senses, the corresponding sense objects, and their corresponding material elements. If we analyze it in this way, we become detached. When you dissect something, it loses its mystification. Its mysterious quality is lost if something is dissected. That's what Sankhya is for. This analysis of the elements, their interactions, and their entanglement helps us to take a step back from the senses and the objects and to analyze and see, is this really pleasure, or is this just another combination of the same objects again and again? Is this really love, or is this just something for my hands to touch? Is this just the sensation of the air element within the nervous system of my skin? If we think about it, analyzing it like this, then detachment results. That's why the yogis, especially the Jnana yogis, they'll apply this Sankhya and practice austerity so that they can withdraw from the entanglement in the sense objects. It's very helpful to analyze and to dissect, and in this way to become detached. We need to think, what is it about this object? It's just a combination of some plastic, some metal, some silicon, right? A little electrical current. What is it about this object, this laptop right here? And you break it down and consider the origin of its elements. This was mined from the earth here, and the oil was transformed into plastic there, and who knows how many slaves were involved. If you really analyze it and go into it, then it will become detached. It's exactly the reason why we don't analyze a lot of the things that we enjoy consuming. It's bad for business. If you really think about where everything's coming from, how it was made, what resources and what labor, how it was shipped, the pollution, the destruction of natural environments, just so I can have this piece of crap. If we really think about it, it kind of ruins the fun. That's why, the big industrialists don't want you to know that sort of stuff. That's why they keep those sort of things under wraps as much as possible. Like how the chocolate, how Nestle is sourcing their cocoa from slave labor. They try to hide that sort of stuff. How they buy up water sources. They don't want you to know. Because if you think about it, if you analyze it, you lose any attraction to the thing. So that's Sankhya, and that's why the Yamadutas are helping us to see in that way. Consider 5 senses of perception, 5 working senses, 5 objects of the senses. The mind is superior. They interact in this way, and they can be dissected in this way. That's putting the mind in the superior position, to think about the entanglement of the senses with their objects, to analyze it, to contemplate it. So that detachment results. This is just a little sample of the Sankhya, of course, which is described by Lord Kapila Dev and is chronicled in the 3rd canto of our Srimad Bhagavatam. Therein, Lord Kapila Dev gives us even more dissection so that we can facilitate detachment from material existence. It's so important to use our head. That's why the Yamadutas are saying this. The mind is superior. You got to use your head and think about it. Why are we pursuing this particular object? Why are your senses why are they so necessary that they connect with an object? Why can't you just sit down in silence? The great American author John Steinbeck said, all of the vices of men exist because he simply cannot sit down and be content. I can't remember the exact words, but it's something along those lines. Every vice of men, all of the terrible vikarma that we do is the result of just not being able to sit down peacefully and be content. So we should analyze, why are my senses so habituated to pursuing these objects? Why is society pressuring me to consume more objects? We need to analyze. That's what putting the mind in the superior place means. That's why the mind is the superior element. It's meant to be thought about. Got to think about all these inferior things. And above the mind, of course, is the soul proper. The soul is different from the mind. We see that because we are the observer of the mind's activity. We observe. Sometimes we don't, we can't interact with the mind as much as we'd like, as much as control as we'd like to have over it, but we observe the mind's different changes. So what is the aspect that does not change? That is the spiritual self. That part which doesn't change is the very definition of spiritual. And therefore it is the most superior. Na sato vidite bhavo, na bhavo vidite sata. Ubayorapi drishtantas tanayos tattvadarshi. Krishna says in the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, that which doesn't change is sat, is real, it's constant, and it's not the body, it's the soul. And that which does change, which is always in flux, and therefore is temporary, and is therefore not real, is the body. So the foundation upon which the mind exists, and the observer of that mind's activities, the unchanging observer, is the real self. That's the soul. We need to analyze, and this way be confidently convinced that the self is the soul and not the mind, because the self observes the mind's changes, but that observation does not change. That's the real self. And so the Yamadutas are saying here, this is superior, this is the most superior. That's why this Sankhya is so useful. If we really take some time to contemplate, what are the elements of my existence? To categorize and to dissect brings about detachment from that entanglement. Of course, for the bhakti yogis, our process, it can include this analysis. Of course, Srila Prabhupada does want us to read the books and to really think about these things. But also the devotees just approach Krishna. We just approach Krishna and pray for help, as is described in this purport, where Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying, Ai Nanda Tanuja Kinkaram. Kinkara means I'm just a servant, a lowly servant. Kinkara. Many of the gopis in Vrindavan, they call themselves Kinkari. I don't want to just be your maidservant. If you read some of the Goswami literature, there's lots of Kinkaris. So, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is giving us a hint of that spiritual position of being a Kinkari, maidservant of Radha and Krishna in the spiritual world. When he says, Ai Nanda Tanuja, O son of Nanda, Kinkaram, I'm just a lowly servant. Patitam mam, I'm so fallen. Patita. Patitam mam vishame bhuvambado. And I'm just in this ocean of bhava. There's bhava, which is the ecstasy. And then there's bhava, which is material existence. Bhavambuddho, like a huge ocean of it. I'm just so immersed in it. This is how the devotee, the bhakti yogi, approaches Krishna. I mean, you can do the analysis and say, okay, I'm going to get my mind in control. And we should. But we should also recognize, what is the expression? How does the pure devotee react to this? Patitam mam vishame bhuvambada. I'm just overwhelmed by this ocean of material existence. Kripaya tava. So please be merciful to me and just give me a little shelter at your lotus feet. In fact, just place me among the little particles of dust at your lotus feet. Pada pankaja, lotus feet, stita duli, a tiny little speck of dust. Just if you just let me be there at your lotus feet, then all these problems will be solved. That's how the devotee prays. This Sankhya stuff is wasted on me. I'm not intelligent enough. I barely even read. Too busy scrolling. And too busy with the endless scroll, my lord. So please, I'm so fallen. Patitamam vishame bhavambado. Has anyone ever been in the middle of the ocean who's listening? I love this analogy because I've been in the middle of the ocean. And it's like hell. I can't think of any worse place in the world. Humans should not be way out in the middle of the ocean. But I've sailed on a ship through the Tasman Sea for 7 days. It's a long story. And you get to a point when you're so far from any landmass, there is nothing but water. There's nothing else. You got water and your little boat. Just like, this is it. If I fall off this boat in the middle of the night, because you have to do these night shifts, you know, you can't just like go to sleep. Someone's got to be awake at the helm at all times. So you take turns. So here I am on this ship, this 40-foot long ketch-rigged sailboat with this Canadian guy I just met, going through the ocean. You can't see anything. And if there's clouds in the sky, you can't even see the stars. Pitch black. It is like hell. I mean, I can't even describe how fearful that situation is. There's a term for it. It's called thalassophobia. The fear of the immensity of the ocean. I remember being on this boat in the middle of the night, holding onto the helm. It's pitch black. You cannot see anything. You just have this little GPS to kind of know, like, this is the direction I'm supposed to go for several days. I remember having this thought, like, the other guy is asleep in the cabin. What if I just fell off the back here? Because the helm is usually at the back. There's only like 4 to 5 feet before you're just in the water. And the boat, you know, the rigging is there, so it's moving forward. And it goes, it's not really fast, but faster than you can swim. And I thought to myself, if I just like dozed off and fell over the back of this stern, that would be it. It's like, you like, the guy's asleep, he wouldn't even hear me. You just sink into the ocean and just be done. It was such a scary situation to be in. And then what to speak of having huge storms while you're on the ocean. It's so horrible. And so when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Bhavam Buddha, this ocean of material existence, it really hits home for me. There's this feeling of hopelessness. I don't even see any land. I have no shelter. In the middle of the ocean of material existence, I've got nothing, my Lord. Patitamam, I'm so fallen. So you please, Kripaya, just be a little kind to me and just help me, please. Just put me in, I'll just be one of the little particles of dust at your lotus feet. Because otherwise, I cannot solve this material problem. I cannot fix this. That's how the devotees deal with this situation. Although we're learning about the Sankhya approach and the analyzing and the dissecting, the devotees' approach is described by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Kripaya tava parapankaja stita duli sadrisham vichintya. Please just, God, please save me. It's very effective. It's very effective. Prabhupada says the price you have to pay is to cry. That's the price you have to pay for this love of God. You just got to be willing to cry. And if you're not crying, you should be crying because you're not crying, because that's really pathetic that you can't cry. It's really, really pathetic. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, whom we just celebrated, he also sings in his famous bhajan, Anadi Karma Pale. Anadi is a really important term here, where he's saying, you can't even measure, like, when did this all begin? Adi can mean the beginning of something. Anadi, it seems like there's no beginning to my karma pale, being entangled in the fruits of material existence, in this karma. I don't even know how it started. You know? You think if I can just go back to where it started, then maybe I can undo it, right? Like someone's trying to solve a case or resolve some problem. You try to see, like, well, what happened first? But Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying, Anadi karma pale. It's been going on for so long. My entanglement is so deep and such a duration. You know, I don't even know, like, what was the cardinal sin here? So he's showing this is not the Sankhya analysis. He's like, I don't even know how it started. I don't know how long it's been going on. It's just such a desperate situation. Oh my Lord. So Taribari Nanthekupaya, please just, I don't know how to save myself. Please just save me. God, please. That's how Bhaktivinoda Thakur approaches the Lord. That's how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu approaches the Lord. And we should have a little bit of humility and approach the Lord in the same way and say, my God, I'm just such a pathetic mess. Please save me. Krishna, just help me, please. Hare Krishna. So, in conclusion, the Sankhya approach is very helpful for us. We should use our intelligence. We should use our mind to analyze what is the situation. What the hell is going on here? How is this body interacting with the material elements, and why? Why is it that I'm inclined towards this particular sense object as a result of my past karma? Why is it that society urges me to consume more to validate their own existence? If we analyze in this way, we can dissect, we can become detached. But of course, in Kali Yuga, we're all pretty messed up. So it's worthwhile for us. It is important for us to approach the Lord as demonstrated by the Lord himself, as Srila Prabhupada said in this purport. Where did he say? Somewhere in this purport. The Lord himself is demonstrating how to take shelter of him, how to go back home, back to Godhead. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is demonstrating. Patitam mam. I'm such a desperate case here. I'm such a desperate case, Lord. And if for you to fulfill your name and fame and status as Patita Pavana, you just have to save me. You have to. Because I am Patita. So let's take seriously the demonstration of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And as we're reciting this Shikshashtakam, let's pray with our heart, Lord, please just help me. Please help me, and please help everyone. Because Kali Yuga is so messed up. Our entanglement with the senses is anadi karma pale. It's just like it's been going on for so long. We're so entrenched. Nothing else can save us except you, O Lord. That's how we should pray. Sarvadharman parityaja. All that other stuff is not going to work. The pious activities, the rituals, the good karma, it's wasted on me. Mam ekam sharanam raja. Krishna is saying, just surrender to me. Don't worry, ma shucha. Just don't worry about everything else. When he says ma shucha, it means we're all just so pathetic. Just don't worry about it. Krishna is saying, just surrender to me, I'll take care of everything. Not because we're highly qualified, but because we're just so pathetic. Patita. Patita. I mean, you Prabhus aren't pathetic. You Prabhus are all so wonderful and doing such great service. Some of us are pathetic. That's what patita means, by the way. I don't know if that's the etymological origin of the English word pathetic, but it might come from patita, which means very fallen. Hare Krishna. So before I get worked up, I should stop here. Sometimes I need to catch my breath and ask if there's any comments from the devotees or some questions if you're feeling really risky today. And if not, then we will get on with our devotional lives. No? Okay, thank you, dear devotees, for tuning in and listening to some Srimad Bhagavatam today.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol Tarika Prabhu.
Yeah, you're not getting off that easy. I have to tell you that was really an exceptional class. That was pretty spectacular.
I'm sorry I subject you to my personal therapy sessions.
Oh, stop. Anyway, I thank you very much for a really nice class. I really appreciate the discussion of Shikshastika. I meditate on this every day. I recite it every morning. And yes, Ai Nanda Tanoja Kinkaram, this is of all the verses that one particularly resonates for me. Hey, you were talking about all vices arising from our inability uh, to be satisfied.
Yeah, I mean, this is Steinbeck, so he's not exactly one of our acharyas, but he put it poetically. It was something along, I can't remember the exact word, something along the lines that all of the vices of men result from not being able to just sit down and be content. Something like that.
Yeah, I have seen similar expressions in Shastra. Can't recall exactly where, but I was thinking about the address that Srila Prabhupada gave when he visited Gita Nagari in 1976, in which he said, live village life, simple life, and be satisfied with the bare necessities. There is no need of luxury, and save time and chant Hare Krishna. This is ideal life. So I am very pleased that you are doing that, and do it more nicely so that others may be attracted. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that, any realizations.
Yeah, the Gita Nagari has the potential to demonstrate that. It's up to the devotees who live there. I'm not really among them, unfortunately. I'm just kind of on the peripheral, help out when I can and when I want, which is the challenge in community, of course, to participate not just when you want, but when the community needs. But the devotees who reside there especially can demonstrate, they have that challenge to demonstrate simple living and higher thinking, that we can be content staying here and living this lifestyle. And it does impress people. You know, those of you who do live on the farm, who's here, James and Chris, it does impress people. When I tell people about Gita Nagari, everyone's impressed. It's like people are inclined to that. They want that, but it's really hard to get over our habits of living in a certain way. But they're attracted to it. And so there's a sort of preaching there. Just by your existence at Gita Nagari, it's actually preaching to people, demonstrating it is possible to have a simpler lifestyle and to not be burdened by these vices. It's a big burden, really. And you enjoy in the exact same way as the hogs and the dogs. But to have a really big house and have really nice cars and to have a whole, an extended family and to have all sorts of stuff, it's just a lot of work that's involved. And yet the pleasure that's enjoyed is not much different from the hogs who are eating slop. So we should demonstrate that since it's not a big difference, might as well live simply and focus on devotional service. So I think Gita Nagari is very important for demonstrating that. But this quote from Steinbeck reminds me of what's said about Lord Nityananda Prabhu in the Chaitanya Charitamrita just before the Chiddadahi festival, where they have the chipped rice mixed with the yogurt. It's described that just before this festival was happening, Lord Nityananda was simply sitting on a rock by the river, just sitting there. It's said very explicitly by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. He's simply sitting there because he's Nitya Ananda. He's always blissful. Nitya Ananda, eternally blissful. Like he didn't have to do anything. That's the spiritual position that the Lord is demonstrating. He could just sit there and be blissful. But we can't do that. We're like, I gotta get involved in some karma. So the Gita Nagari lifestyle is teaching us that we can just be satisfied. We don't have to engage in so much excessive karma just to get a little sense, get all these sense objects and get a little gratification from it. So I hope that the devotees who reside in Gita Nagari are taking seriously the opportunity to demonstrate a much more wholesome and healthy lifestyle to the world. And people are hearing about it more and more and will be affected. I'm sure that was your point, Tarika Prabhu, and you just wanted me to say it to be your mouthpiece. But perhaps you can add something more about the significance of the simple living and higher thinking lifestyle before we wrap up.
Oh gosh, we could go on for a long time. But yes, Srila Prabhupada wanted Gita Nagari to be an example and a model, and not just for society at large, but for our temples, other farm communities, and so on. Just like he created um, ideal examples for other aspects of our devotional life, such as deity worship. Um, um, Los Angeles and Vrindavan were established by Srila Prabhupada to be um, the uh, the ideal, the example of ideal deity worship, the standard that he wanted to establish, um, and um, for simple living, high thinking, of all of our farm communities, Gita Nagari, Srila Prabhupada had chosen to be his example. And he attempted to come here to establish that example in an ideal way, but he was forced to return to Vrindavan and subsequently left his body. So he didn't get the chance to do what he wanted to do, but he expressed the fact that he wanted to teach us how to do that, how to live simply, um, depending upon Krishna by depending upon the land and the cows. That all of our necessities can be had simply and easily, and also locally. One of his instructions was that in order to establish simplicity, one means is that you resign yourself to living locally, which means that um, all of your necessities, whatever you acquire, should come from a local source, not that you have to rely upon all kinds of shipping and all of what that entails. But locally, he defined as a 10-mile radius because an ox can transport goods within 10 miles in the course of a day. So whatever you can easily transport by ox cart in a day, those are the things that you should rely upon, and not anything coming from any other source. Anyway, that was one way in which he had instructed us to establish simplicity within our farm communities. And of course, he also saw that farm communities were not just an opportunity to establish an ideal village life, but because you can create essentially nearly a closed system, it's an opportunity to introduce varnashram. And so concepts of varnashram are often associated with our farming communities. Um, um, Not that varnashram pertains only to farm communities, but a farm community is a good opportunity to try to begin to establish an example of varnashram. To try to do it elsewhere in society would be difficult to initiate, but you can establish on a small scale an example within the relatively closed system of a simple village setting. So those were some of his ideas. Uh, I think a lot about Gita Nagari. Done a lot of studying of Srila Prabhupada's words about this sort of a project, and he kindly included me in a lot of his discussions about these things on room conversations and morning walks. And sometimes we associate simple living with austere living, and but that wasn't Srila Prabhupada's conception. From his perspective, simple village life is actually quite opulent. He often talked about, he would refer to such projects. He encouraged us to establish what he called Vrindavan villages, living as Krishna lived. Krishna's lifestyle was simple, but it was opulent. There was the extraordinary opulence of the cows and all of the products of the cows, all of the agricultural produce. Opulent, because if you think about it, everything, all of our necessities, everything comes from the land. Sarvakama Dukamahi, Srila Prabhupada would quote. All the necessities come from the land. If you have land and cows, you have everything. So it's not necessarily austere. It can be simple and yet be quite opulent. You can eat better than anyone anywhere. You can live comfortably. Srila Prabhupada would speak about simple cottage. You don't need that much. You don't need a huge house. Just, enough shelter to protect yourself from the elements. And you can eat very nicely and be peaceful without all of the encumbrances of modern life, the affluenza that so many people suffer, creating so many complications for themselves, working themselves to death just for the privilege of being able to continue working. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy lifestyle. You spend all of your time working for somebody else just to make enough money so that you can put gas in your car and feed and clothe yourself so that you can go back to work again. That's terrible. That's no way to live. Anyway, we've gone over time, but I thank you for your comments and for a really nice class. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, bro. Thank you for your insight as always. Thank you, dear devotees, for tuning in. Now have a wonderful day full of devotional service, hearing and chanting, and falling in love with Krishna. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitya Gaura Premanandi, Haribol.